It can be argued that there is no more impactful day on the NFL calendar than night one of the NFL Draft, and the 2023 NFL Draft is upon us, and so is Draft Day Insider from the Star in Frisco in the Globe Life Studios. Welcome in, everybody, as we get you set for the first 24, 25 picks. And then the Cowboys are on the clock at 26 overall, looking to the future of their franchise. Alongside Mickey Spagnola, I'm Kyle Youmans. Glad you're with us. We'll soon be joined by Hailey Sutton and Patrick Walker as we really look at this Cowboys first round and what could be on the table. Feels like everything is on the table for the Cowboys this time around.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing for the Dallas Cowboys. You know, there's a good and a bad about drafting at 26. If you're drafting at 26, it means you're coming off a pretty darn good season and including a win in the playoffs. The downside is you're drafting 26 and it's probably picked over pretty much. But the good thing also is, Kyle, is that the Cowboys basically covered themselves in almost every spot they needed to in the offseason, what they did with trades, what they did with re-signing some of their own players, and re-signing some other guys too. So I think as they continue to say, this is about as pure as they can have going into a draft because they don't need to reach for a particular position.
And it keeps the options open for the Cowboys, and multiple positions are on the board. But before we talk about some of the biggest needs for the Cowboys, let's go out to Kansas City, where, of course, the selections will take place tonight, where our very own Hailey Sutton has boots on the ground and looking at what the Cowboys could do out in KC.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. Welcome out to Kansas City, where in just a few hours, the Dallas Cowboys will welcome a new face to their NFL roster. They get pick number 26, one of 7 picks in this year's draft. Now, we had the opportunity to speak to several NFL insiders, some draft analysts, on what exactly the Cowboys should do with that pick 26. The general consensus sounded like the best opportunity would be to trade up for a guy like Bijan Robinson or Jahmyr Gibbs, just some guys who could come in and be immediate playmakers for this Dallas Cowboys team. Now, the other option would be to take a tight end. There's a lot of talent at that position coming into this year's draft. Guys like Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer would be some other options to help benefit that tight end room, especially with Dak Prescott losing both Ezekiel Elliott and Dalton Schultz this offseason. Now, we know Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, and Mike McCarthy are okay with trading up or trading down. It just kind of depends on how the chips fall and how their board works out as they approach that 26th pick. There's a lot to keep our eye on. You could also go offensive line, defensive line, but like I said, the general consensus feels like they could trade up to get a big playmaker to come in and make an impact. We will, of course, keep our eye on it as the NFL draft gets underway shortly. We'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks so much, Hailey. We will check back in with Hailey Sutton throughout the weekend as she is out in Kansas City. Now, Mickey, we talked about how the Cowboys covered some of their bases in terms of those needs, and they aren't necessarily pigeonholed into selecting a certain position in the first round of the draft. But there are some needs for this Cowboys team, and it starts up front with the offensive line. At the moment, it's unsure who is the starter at the left guard spot, and there are some first-round potentials like O'Cyrus Torrence, the guard from Florida, and then Steve Avila from TCU, who, of course, was a part of that college football playoff team in TCU last year. When you look at these two guys, who do you feel like would be the best fit for the Cowboys at 26?
Well, from what I see there, I would think it's Avila. But for my taking a guard in the first round is a little extreme. The Cowboys in their entire draft history have only done that twice. Zach Martin, of course. John Nyland in 1966, okay? So they haven't prioritized that position. And I'll just say one more thing, quoting what Jerry Jones said. He said, sometimes you got to have guys on your roster to come out and play. You can't have a multi-million-dollar guy at every position, and especially on the offensive line when you have a quarterback, you have wide receivers, you have defensive ends. So if I can get one in the second round, I'd be good with that.
And Avila could potentially fall to 58 as well, so that might be one of those tweener picks that you're talking about. A position that they have drafted very high, at least in recent memory, has been linebacker. And there are a few linebackers on the board that you could potentially go to as well, including local product Drew Sanders. Is that a position that needs to have a selection this week?
I think it absolutely does, because if you look at the depth they have there, you're talking Leighton Vander Esch, you're talking Damone Clark, And then after that, we don't know about Jabril Cox and where are they going to play Micah the majority of the time. And it sounds like this Sanders guy is kind of a poor man's Micah Parsons, right? He can do a little rushing. He can play linebacker. So, yeah, I could see them taking a linebacker and taking a high, even if it's the first or second round.
There you go. So Drew Sanders could be coming home to Dallas, where he played his high school ball in Denton, just about 20 miles north from where we sit at the Star in Frisco. But when we come back, Mickey mentioned they haven't taken guard in the first round in quite some time. They've only taken a tight end in the first round twice in franchise history, the last being in 1997. Could that change today with a Notre Dame tight end like Michael Mayer on the board at 26?
Dallas Cowboys Draft Day Insider is brought to you by United Ag and Turf, your first-round draft pick for John Deere equipment. And by Dr. Pepper, the one Cowboys fans deserve. This segment is brought to you by United Ag and Turf, your first-round draft pick for John Deere equipment.
I'm a 6'3", 6'4", 210 to 215 pound receiver that moves like a slot, moves like a running back. I'm gonna come in day one and be a sponge. I'm not gonna, be talking too much. I'm gonna soak up the playbook as quick as I can. I'm a fast learner, and then with the ball in my hands, I'm special. I don't feel like there's nobody right now in this draft class that can do what I can do.
TCU Horned Frog Quentin Johnston, one of the elite pass catchers in this 2023 NFL draft, telling you why he could be a good fit for the Dallas Cowboys at some point through the draft weekend, and more specifically at 26 as we welcome Patrick Walker into the show. And Patrick, this is an offense that could certainly use some more weapons for Dak Prescott, but for the most part, the reports are there's been a disconnect on how highly the media views these wide receiver prospects and how highly the draft scouts and draft front offices certainly view them. This is how I view them in terms of my top 5 and their overall grades going into night 1 of the NFL draft. It starts with Jackson Smith and Jigba, but really plenty of prospects to choose from if you wanted to add to this offense.
And that's saying the least. Obviously, the Cowboys, they go out and they trade for Brandon Cooks. That's going to solve the issue in the immediate as far as who's your explosive receiver opposite CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup. But any one of these guys, in addition to some that are not on this list, you talk about Jalen Hyatt, for example, so much of a robust prospect class for the Cowboys at wide receiver. They could go first round with it, or they could wait second, third round and still get a high-impact guy who could step in day one and make some waves.
Well, let's take a look at some of their night 1 options and how they could fit in with Dak Prescott, starting with Quentin Johnston, who you just heard from, and then Zay Flowers, who's really seen as a shifty slot receiver, athletic wideout who could take the top off. Who fits better for the Cowboys at 26?
I think for my money, I'm going to go with Zay Flowers. I think Zay Flowers is a bit more explosive, not to take anything away from Quentin Johnston. Obviously, he's one of the best wide receivers in the class. And for my money, he's right there behind Jackson Smith and Jigba. That's a debate for another day, though. But Zay Flowers, he gives you that explosiveness down the field. He gives you that shiftiness. He's a violent runner with the ball in his hands. So those who would mistake him because of his size for simply being that shifty guy who wants to operate in space, he can do that very effectively, but he doesn't run away from the opposing tackler. He can run through a guy as well.
And where there is depth with this wide receiver position, the tight end group looks like it has some top-heavy talent as well. The Cowboys have not selected a tight end in the first round since 1997. They have 2 that they've been rumored to be interested in. Dalton Kincaid, who is a top 15 player for me in the draft. If he's there at 26, I think he's in the conversation. Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, a little bit further down, but still a great value for the tight end position. Could you see the Cowboys going with one of these 2 guys in the first round and kind of breaking the trend that they've been on these last 3 decades almost?
I think absolutely. If one of those 2 guys, Kincaid or Mayer, are available at 26, I don't think the Cowboys pass up on that. Both of those guys are NFL ready right now, and the decision between the 2 really just boils down to what you're looking for from that particular guy. Kincaid, he's more of a refined route runner. He's better at getting separation than Mayer is. However, Mayer is a slightly better blocker. This is a run-first team. Whoever comes in at tight end is going to have to be able to contribute in that aspect as well. But Mayer, more well-rounded. Kincaid, a little bit of a better route runner.
With as deep as this tight end class is, as you pair them with a Mayer and with a Kincaid, do you think, like, if you can turn around and take tight end off the board in the first round, you don't worry about it and you push it to the later parts of the draft. Are there names there that you feel comfortable with?
Absolutely, and this is where it creates a situation where the Cowboys could also be comfortable trading down slightly. Maybe they go from 26 to later in the first round, still giving them that fifth-year option, but maybe they look for the second round tight end. You could move up from 58. You saw the name Darnell Washington. He's there. Luke Musgrave, he's probably going to be there at the beginning of day 2 as well. If they forego a tight end in the first round, have no fear. There's going to be several there for day 2.
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a lot of talent right in between pick 26 and pick 58 that the Cowboys have been interested in. They've brought in on 30 visits. They've had a part of Dallas Day. Keep an eye on a move down scenario should something happen later in the night tonight. And if they stay put, they could draft this guy. If they trade down, they could draft this guy. His name is Will McDonald out of Iowa State. Could the Cowboys surprise everybody and go with an edge rusher on night 1? We'll tell you some of the options for this Cowboys defense when we come back with more Draft Day Insider.
This segment was brought to you by United Ag and Turf, your first-round draft pick for John Deere equipment.
I think you should draft me because I'm a trustworthy player. You can definitely depend on me to do anything. I can play special teams. I don't get into any trouble. I can do anything you want me to. You can move me around. You can count on me to. I'll watch your kids if you wanted me to. You know, it don't matter. Like, you can trust me with anything you want.
Trustworthy, durable, and productive during his time at Iowa State, Will McDonald IV tied the Big 12 record with 34 career sacks in his time inside the Power 5 conference. Back with Mickey Spagnola, Patrick Walker. I'm Kyle Youmans here for Draft Day Insider. Will McDonald has been a popular buzz name around this Cowboys defense. Dan Quinn going to Iowa State and working him out as a part of the pro day activities out there. But also, not to mention, he could be the most likely draft day impact on the defensive side of the football. How would you feel if he's the pick at 26?
You know, I'm good with the defensive end. I think the defensive end gives you a heck of a lot of juice, and obviously at Iowa State he was awfully good at what he did, and 21 and a half of those sacks came in his last 2 years. So this has been a very productive player, and I can find room for a defensive end on this Cowboys defense, especially when you look at the players that are on the last year of their contracts. Dorrance Armstrong, Dante Fowler Jr. are on one-year deals, so I can find a defensive end there.
I'm good with it, and there is no question what the potential and the ceiling is on a guy like McDonald. The only concern I would have is where do you fit him in rotationally to make sure that he's a potential impact guy from day 1, because you're also looking from a Cowboys standpoint. Sam Williams is going to need to get reps as well. You were able to retain Dante Fowler, which is wonderful. But as Mickey said, Fowler is coming up on a contract year. It was a one-year deal. Dorrance Armstrong, a team favorite, a front office favorite. You'd love to believe that Dorrance Armstrong will be back on a long-term deal. But McDonald, if you look at some of the other edge rushers, maybe you could still get someone who's an impact guy on day 2. I don't think that you necessarily have to go with a guy like McDonald, but if they did, I'd be fine with it.
It would be a surplus pick for a position that's been a strength, but you hear about it all the time. If you're good at something and you have enough players, why not add one more and continue to make that a strength? Dan Quinn loves himself some Will McDonald. That's a potential at 26, and all signs point to him being available. Let's talk about a guy who may not be available, but rumors are he could start falling, and that's Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State. You talk about a corner that could come in and be a day 1 impact, even with the players that the Cowboys have at hand right now. Joey Porter Jr. could certainly do that for this Cowboys defense.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's necessarily Joey Porter Jr., but I could see the Cowboys drafting a cornerback. There's room for a cornerback. Now, from what I've read about this guy, I hadn't seen that much of him, but he kind of scares me just a little bit. He seems to be one of those gamblers out there at cornerback, but for sure, cornerback is one of those positions that you put a priority on in the first round.
And you talk about the cornerback position as a whole, it's not just Joey Porter Jr., it's actually Emmanuel Forbes that's also been in that conversation. If you throw him into the fold, Patrick, you talk about length and playmaking ability, if you see a guy fall like Joey Porter Jr., great. You might actually have to reach on a guy like Emmanuel Forbes.
Absolutely, and hey, let's keep the TCU party going, right? When it comes to Emmanuel Forbes, you're talking about a guy with length. You're talking about a guy who has a little bit of the prototypical size when it comes to playing defensive back in a Dan Quinn system. So you have to love what Emmanuel Forbes brings to the table, and he's an absolute ball hawk. This is a situation where he'd be joining a Cowboys team who's already one of the better units in the league as far as taking the ball away. You drop a guy like Forbes into that mix, and it only gets better.
Yeah, it only gets better. Something to keep an eye on. Of course, that cornerback spot not necessarily locked up after this year. That could be a spot where the Cowboys go early and often throughout draft weekend. But when we come back, you talk about a surplus pick and something that would be a whole lot of fun. What if Bijan Robinson is there at 26? Could the Cowboys make the pick? We play Fact or Fiction next. One of the most unpredictable nights of the entire NFL calendar is here, night one of the NFL draft, and this is Draft Day Insider. Because of the unpredictability, we're going to do the only logical thing that we can do up here. We're going to try and predict the future, right? In terms of what's going to happen in terms of pick 26 and before that throughout the NFL draft, starting with one of the biggest names throughout this entire process, Bijan Robinson, the 5'11", 215-pound Doak Walk Award winner out of Texas. Robinson brings an element of a passing game standpoint and just a downhill runner, home run threat. If the Cowboys have him on the board at pick 26, do they make the pick? Fact or fiction?
The fact that they will break their leg putting his card up there to take him.
What do you think, Patrick?
Absolute fact. The Cowboys won't be able to run this card in quickly enough.
There you go. So, hey, we got that one out of the way. We run as quickly as Bijan Robinson through the Bijan Robinson topic. Now we go to tight end or wide receiver. More tight ends will be selected than wide receivers in the first round. Patrick, you and I just talked about it a little bit. Do you think more tight ends could go?
I think that's fiction. I think whereas this tight end class, you still have some of these guys available on day two. When it comes to day one, the Cowboys, as well as the other 31 NFL teams, they would prefer to have a fifth-year option on a wide receiver over a tight end. The odds are just better that your wide receiver in the first round is going to pan out.
Mickey, what do you think?
I think that wide receiver, I think teams would value the position more than tight end in the first round.
There you go. So wide receiver certainly there. What about front office potentials here? The Cowboys have made it known that they could trade down or they could trade right back up and go get a specific prospect. Mickey, do you think that's fact or fiction that they will not stay put at 26?
If they move, they'll do either to get the guy they want.
So is that a fact or a fiction?
Yeah, I guess it's fact that they're going to move, right?
Okay. What do you think, Pat?
I think they stand pat. I think they stand pat at 26. There's just so much value that can be had no matter who falls to them, and there will be several players of different positions that will be there at 27, and they know that, so they'll be able to make their pick.
I'm not technically a part of this segment and giving my opinion, but I'm going to say it's fact as well. I think they're going to have names there at pick number 20, or excuse me, I'm going to say it's fiction. I think there are names there that they will stay put at pick number 26 and pick in their selection there because there's so many different options. We've already talked about it. It's wide open from position to position, and impact players are abundant for the Cowboys. Now, speaking of impact players, what about a developmental prospect at quarterback? They've talked about that before. They're not interested in these top quarterbacks who are trying to be impact players in terms of the programs at the front of the draft. Do you think 4 quarterbacks can go inside the top 15 of this NFL draft, Mickey?
I think there's enough desperation in this league for the quarterback position that 4 of them will be drafted in the top 15.
Okay, there you go.
I think that's an absolute fact. When you look at the needs of any of those teams that are in the top 5, top 10, there most certainly will be a run on quarterbacks to start this draft.
Yeah, Bryce Young out of Alabama, C.J. Stroud from Ohio State, Will Levis from Kentucky. And then Anthony Richardson has been a top 10 potential prospect in there, too. You could even throw Hendon Hooker from Tennessee coming off of an ACL injury, but teams might want that fifth-year option that go up and get a guy like Hendon Hooker. But here's the thing about the Cowboys. Since they aren't hunting quarterbacks early, you want all those quarterbacks to go before pick 26. Get them up there and keep those non-quarterbacks sliding down later in the draft. But when we come back, we have bold predictions, and we wrap up things on night one of Draft Day Insider from the Star in Frisco. What are the bold predictions that could involve Will Anderson from Alabama?
Dallas Cowboys Draft Day Insider was brought to you by United Ag and Turf, your first-round draft pick for John Deere equipment, and by Dr. Pepper, the one Cowboys fans deserve.
Night one of the NFL Draft is here. This is Draft Day Insiders. We wrap things up from the Star in Frisco. We're just upstairs from where we are right now. The Cowboys will make some big-time decisions on the future of their franchise. Mickey Spagnola, Patrick Walker, I'm Kyle Youmans. Time now for bold predictions, something that can happen on night one that may shock the world, but not going to shock Patrick Walker. What do you think is going to happen?
You know, I hate to say this out loud, but bold predictions, and it's possible. A lot of people think Jalen Carter out of Georgia will fall out of the top 10. I don't believe that's the case, and that's because I believe the Philadelphia Eagles will select Jalen Carter to tandem him with Jordan Davis in a bulldog on bulldog kind of situation on their defensive line, making their already stout defensive line that much better. Sorry, Cowboys fans, but yeah, I could see it happening.
I guess the first-round pick might have to be an offensive lineman at that point, just to try and block a guy like Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter in that defense. What do you think, Mickey?
Well, if they need somebody to block them, I got your guy. If you want something bold, this draft's going to be picked over by the time they get to 26, and the Cowboys are going to take tight end Darnell Washington. He's a prospect as a receiving tight end, but the guy can block. He's 6'6", 270 pounds. Keep an eye on him.
There you go. One Georgia Bulldog to another Georgia Bulldog. I've got a dog for Dan Quinn's defense. Will McDonald will be the pick no matter what happens at 26. Enjoy night one, everybody. That does it for Draft Day Insider.